Ah, yes, another offseason, another conversation about the uncertainty that we have at the quarterback position. And for the first time in quite a period of time, it seems somewhat hopeless to be a Colts fan. And I'm not the guy to be negative, but I'm talking about from the perspective of the quarterback. Like, one thing we've always been able to do under Chris Ballard, and save for Chris Ballard for a second, okay? Because I'm not defending him, I'm just telling you the reality of the situation. We've always been able to go into an offseason and say we're one big offseason away, or we're a quarterback away from being a good team here. This is probably the first time that I can remember where that is not the case. And I do think that we're all on board with bringing in another quarterback this offseason, because you can't just go into next season with Anthony Richardson and Anthony Richardson alone. Between his play, the injuries, the potential lack of work ethic, which I think may be a little bit overblown. It's I don't know, right? Generally with a report like that, where there is smoke, there's fire. So it's not to say that there's nothing to that at all, but I don't think he's like a lazy guy. I just think maybe he doesn't know what he doesn't know, and that is what it is, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you can only hold a guy accountable to the point where he's in the building. Of course, there is a level of when he goes home. I mean, what are you going to do? Put cameras in his house? So there is a level of that as well. Now, forget Ballard and all of this for a second. Forget Jim Irsay. If I were to be Shane Steichen, like if I am Shane Steichen, I am walking up to that office and I am saying, listen here, there is absolutely no way on God's green earth that you are going to send me into next season with Anthony Richardson, Jason Bean, and Sam Ellinger and absolutely nothing else. Just sending me into the deep end with absolutely no swimmies in a year where I'm coaching for my job. Absolutely not. I would consider resigning from the position right there. Now we know, of course, that Chris Ballard has alluded to the fact, and essentially, I mean, he didn't guarantee it, but in the world of Chris Ballard, what he said, you'd be hard-pressed to convince me that someone isn't going to be brought in for the Indianapolis Colts. And that's all good and well, but my problem with it does become when I start to see the ideas from the fan base. Like, the way the world, and I know it's 2025, like the world has changed quite a bit, and I'm not that old, but since I was 18 versus 28 now, past decade, I mean, a lot has changed, but it hasn't changed to the point where, I mean, in what world do we as Colts fans come out and say, we want a quarterback that could come in and win for us, a quarterback that we can get behind, and then conclude that the quarterbacks we should bring in are Sam Darnold and Justin Fields? I mean, my goodness. Justin Fields is one thing. We'll talk about that a little bit later because I'm starting to come around on the idea a little bit more. But bringing in Sam Darnold to the tune of $40 million, are you out of your mind? That idea is absurd on its face, at least at that price point, particularly after watching Sam Darnold wet the bed for the final 2 weeks of the season. Now, is Sam Darnold better than our guy? Sure, of course he is. But for $45 million, you have absolutely lost your mind if that is what it is that you're advocating for. Like, at what makes that any different than bringing in Carson Wentz when we did that? I mean, you're talking about a guy that basically nobody really wants, is really wanted, right? Bounced around the league, and now the Colts are going to take the scraps. I mean, I thought you guys wanted things to change in this organization. And when I hear ideas like Sam Darnold, I start to think that maybe you guys have no idea what it is that you want, okay? Because on one breath, you say we need to do things differently, and in the next, you advocate for the opposite, which would be the same thing that we've always done. Sam Darnold would represent much of the criticism for kind of the way Ballard has handled the quarterback position. It would be much of the same. I'm shocked that anybody at all in the fan base would want this for the Colts. It feels weird that I even have to explain why it is that the idea is bad. Like, it feels like a bizarro world. I mean, the Vikings, for example, right? Okay, 14-3. Fine. The Vikings have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, both of which might be the best receiver on the Colts if they were on the team. Kevin O'Connell, a stellar defense, had the luxury of playing the AFC South this past season. I mean, even Case Keenum was able to go 13-3 with that organization. Now, it's not to take away from Darnold's season entirely, okay? 4,300 yards, 35 passing touchdowns, 12 picks is absolutely nothing to sneeze at. But there is a little something that we call the eye test that goes beyond the numbers, okay? And Sam Darnold, it's the quarterback position is one of those. And I'm going to risk sounding pretentious here, okay? There is a element to it. I think a lot of people would describe it with the word poise, and that definitely is what it is on some level. But there is just something when you look at a guy. It's not to say that it's 100% accuracy and you always know who's good and who's not, but from the perspective of a guy that's going to go back there and you trust to not shit himself in big moments, sometimes you could just look at the way a guy drops back. It's hard to put into words. I think some of you guys that have been watching football for a period of time are going to know what I'm talking about. And just you look and say, that's not the guy. Like, he doesn't have what it takes. Okay, for example, a Joe Burrow, okay? You look at a Joe Burrow, I know that's the most extreme example that there is, but when you look at a Joe Burrow and the way that he carries himself onto the field, the way that he drops back, the way he stands in the pocket, okay, and the decisions that he makes under duress, you just know, you could just look like there's just something going on beyond words that you know when you look at him. And of course, it's reflected in the numbers, but forget the numbers. I'm talking about just watching. You just know before he throws the football, you can feel it, okay? Sam Darnold, to me, it just displays the opposite and has always displayed the opposite. Like, I wasn't even a huge fan of him out of the draft during that time when he was coming out of USC. Now, here's the problem overall, right? Here's the bad news for you. Unfortunately, there is really no situation, no scenario right now in this offseason that has anyone feeling great about the quarterback position after the season, short of trading for Tanner McKee, which, of course, is one of the great ideas that I've ever had. And I could go on a tangent on it forever. I mean, I absolutely love Tanner McKee. In fact, I will leave. If you have not seen that and you're not familiar with who Tanner McKee is, in the description of this video, I'm going to leave the link to that one. You want to talk, I don't know how many of my episodes you've listened to. You want to talk about one of the great takes I've ever had in my life. That's it right there, and I'm standing by it. But the reality is that I'm not going to get my way on that one. So short of that, there's not many scenarios that we're going to be happy with. But if you're the type of person who has criticized Ballard's approach to addressing quarterback and then advocate for Sam Darnold at $40 million, I mean, come on. How inconsistent can you possibly be? And if you want the Colts to start being more taken more seriously and advocate for a guy like Jameis Winston, I mean, come on. Like, are we paying attention? Like, are we watching the same thing? Are we watching the same NFL? I don't know. So we're going to try to talk about some better ideas today. Nothing that makes us feel great, but ones that I feel far better about in terms of risk reward than Sam Darnold at $40 million. So we're going to talk about that both in free agency and the trade market. But before we do, you know what it is. My name is Justin. This right here is the Ride the Bench Colts podcast. As always, ask everyone watching and enjoying the show, go ahead, shoot it a like. It's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Of course, subscribe if you want to be a part of the journey. We're on the quest to 5,000 over here. We're nowhere close, but that's kind of the big milestone for me. If we could get there maybe by next season or the middle of next season or late next season, that's just what I have my eyes on right now. Subscribe if you want to be a part of the journey. You keep coming back enjoying the content. Audio listeners, leave a 5-star review. Let the people know how much you're enjoying the show. And I mean, that's an intro, and that's me asking you to do some stuff for me, which, quite frankly, whatever, right? Weird transition. So, free agent options for the Indianapolis Colts. Justin Fields, as I said at the top of the show, there's an option, okay? And I'm starting to come around on this one from this sense, okay? Now, if Justin Fields was $40 million, I'd be listening. I've never liked Justin Fields, okay? I've never, and he's done nothing to prove me wrong, okay? So it's hard for me now to flip around and say that I have a confidence in his ability to become a quality NFL quarterback when I didn't out of the draft, and he has been nothing but a crappy NFL quarterback. No disrespect to Justin Fields, but he hasn't been very good, okay? But I will say this. I don't place as much emphasis on having similar play styles between your starter and your backup quarterback. Like, I don't think that's super important. At the end of the day, you have a really, really big playbook, and there's a lot of plays within that may require quarterback's legs, but there's probably even more plays that don't require the quarterback's legs, okay? So it's not like a necessary thing, but at the same time, there is the idea that he does bring all of the same elements that Richardson has, as bad as he's been, right? He's still 25 years old. Justin Fields, this is, of course, will only cost around $10 million, it seems, for the season, kind of on a prove-it deal, and has proven that he could stay healthy in the league. So it does seem like a natural pairing to kind of bring Justin Fields in here as a natural pivot off of Anthony Richardson. Like, listen, if we could trot out Anthony Richardson, we could trot out Justin Fields, despite me not being too optimistic about it. So I do see Justin Fields as a reasonable option, and I see him as a somewhat likely option. That being said, Again, don't feel great about it. Next. Oh goodness, this one's gonna rub people the wrong way. Zach Wilson. Okay? Native New Yorker over here. You want to talk about a guy who has been through a lot as a quarterback in this league? Zach Wilson would be the guy, okay? Much like a Sam Darnold. He was on the Jets, put into a bad situation, and was kind of damaged goods by the time he's left. But he's had a moment to decompress here with the Denver Broncos. They have their guy in Bo Nix, and there's really not a huge reason for them to keep Zach Wilson around. He has talent, okay? One thing that Zach Wilson has is a lot of talent and a legitimate background as a quarterback. So you have a guy not only who is talented and has a big arm, okay, but also has played quarterback for a very long time and just makes a lot of throws that a lot of other guys can't make. Again, I feel the need to say this repeatedly. We're not talking about guys that I think are going to come in and be the franchise quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts, but I am talking about guys that I think kind of present good risk reward in terms of what they could potentially bring, right? The possible upside versus the downside of bringing them in. And I think Zach Wilson is a guy that I look at and I say, okay, he's mobile. He has kind of all the skills you want, per se, in a stereotypical NFL quarterback or stereotypical modern NFL quarterback. I don't personally think you need a guy that can run quite as much as the next person, but Zach Wilson does bring all the elements people would want other than obviously a disastrous run in New York. I think maybe he's an option. Josh Dobbs was a guy that I liked last year, came in for the Niners this year, and did pretty good work. I advocated for the Colts to sign him as a free agent last season. I'll advocate for them to do it again. Again, all the skills you want out of a modern NFL quarterback. He can run. You could kind of run a similar offense when he's in. And he's done pretty good stuff. Not going to win us a ton of games. You see the theme here. No great scenarios for the Colts, but Josh Dobbs, potentially an option. The Pastronaut. Cooper Rush. He's a guy for the Cowboys that has come in. And listen, there's been a number of times where they've been without Dak Prescott and a number of times where Cooper Rush has come in and, one, played pretty damn good, and two, the Cowboys have won more games than they should have. Cooper Rush, I think, in terms of your traditional quarterback, drop back, throw it, I think he can run an offense. Do I think Cooper Rush is anyone's franchise quarterback? No. But do I think Cooper Rush is a pretty solid option in free agency for the Colts? Yeah, I do. I think if the wheels fall off with Anthony Richardson, you could toss out Cooper Rush, and I don't know. I don't know. At the end of the day, nothing really changes with Cooper Rush. But again, this is the problem when you look at the free agency market. There's nothing great out there, okay? And Russell Wilson, hell no, okay? Trade market on the other side of things, where I think is the better way to go. Of course, I've proposed Tanner McKee already because that's one of the great ideas I've ever had, as I've already said. But how about a Geno Smith is one that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. You have one more year on Geno Smith's deal at $25 million this year. All of his guaranteed money, I believe, or at least the fine majority of it, has already been paid by the Seattle Seahawks. So if you were to trade for Geno Smith, let's say they're looking at him and saying he can't get them over the hump, okay? And they're looking to move on past him. Would they trade Geno Smith potentially for a pick in next year's draft where there are a lot of quarterbacks? Possibly, and it wouldn't take a particularly high one at this point. He's 34 years of age. I don't think anyone looks at Geno Smith as a guy that's going to come out and win someone a Super Bowl. But $25 million for just this season? Listen, Geno Smith isn't Josh Allen. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Lamar Jackson, okay? But at the same time, it's really hard to do better than Geno Smith as a quarterback. It just is. Like, when you remove the elite quarterbacks from the game and you remove franchise quarterbacks, after that, when you just talk about like plain old starters that you could put out there and they could give you a chance to win and can be a stopgap type of quarterback, really hard to do better than Geno Smith. And I do wonder if there would be a significant price tag for someone like him. I don't know, but he's a guy that I think might be on the trade market this offseason potentially, and I think the Colts would have a pretty good chance of pulling it off if they wanted to. Hendon Hooker, another guy like Tanner McKee that was in the draft class of Anthony Richardson. Now, he came out of college a little bit older. I think he was 25 going into that draft. But Hendon Hooker that season, I thought, who, by the way, is the backup for the Detroit Lions, for those of you who have no idea who I'm talking about, I thought arguably, when you looked at it holistically, might have had the best tape of any quarterback in that entire draft class. Like, when you're talking about, one, the production, and two, the quality of competition, I mean, Hendon Hooker was a real good-looking prospect that year, and again, brings a lot of similar things. And the beauty of a guy like a Hendon Hooker, right? And even guys like, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, okay? These are three guys that are young, still kind of in a spot where, one, you don't have to pay them a lot of money, but two may surprise a few people, or at least have a chance to. And if they don't, no harm, no foul. But these are some options at quarterback that I think are decent. But I think by the end of this episode, what you've realized is, man, the Colts are in for it next season at the quarterback position, barring Anthony Richardson takes a massive, massive step, which we're all rooting for. We would all like to happen. But ultimately, I am not going to put my emotional eggs in that basket because I'm not getting burned on it, quite frankly. I'm done with that. I've been burned with too many quarterbacks that the Colts have had, and the writing is on the wall that this one's not going to work out. And all I can do is hope that it does. But that's the episode for today. Like, subscribe. My name is Justin. This right here was the Rise and Bench Colts podcast. And as always, go Colts.